Hello again. Today we're going to look at some of the finer details of Akashicverse's scoring system, as well as how your character works. Not in that order. First, the character basics. The part of you that can be hit is tiny, so you can have some crazy dodging shenanigans if that's your thing, but the patterns and overall game system don't really encourage that. Bullets tend to be fairly fast, and you don't have to graze bullets closely to get any kind of extra benefit. If you take an undefended hit, you get an instant game over, so keep that in mind when weighing risk and reward. You have an energy reserve that you use for your important tools. You can stock up to 8 gauges of it, and the moves that you use cost from 1 to 7, although most don't cost more than 4. It's important to note that this isn't a game where getting a full meter takes a long time. You can go full to empty to full very quickly if you know where you can recharge. You have a shield that you can toggle off or on at will, at least until it's broken. Each bullet that hits you reduces its strength. When it hits 50%, it triggers an auto bomb that removes bullets, gives you 4 energy gauges, and gives some invulnerability that cuts energy recovery until it goes away. When it hits 0%, you get a big warning, 8 gauges of energy, another autobomb, and, again, some invulnerability. At that point, you can't use your shield at all until it recovers back to 50%. Shield energy comes back on its own, though much faster when your shield is off. You get an autobomb back when you're 50% above where it's triggered, so 100% to recover your half shield, and again, 50% to recover the more panic-inducing shield break autobomb. Aside from saving your life when you notice something is about to hit you, the shield can be used to push through something to reach a better position. You can also purposefully take a half shield or full shield break just to get the quick energy, though you'd better do that in a spot where you won't be in too much pressure afterwards, because it takes a while to get it back. Akashicverse has a death shield mechanic. If you activate your shield immediately after taking a lethal hit, you won't die. The log will say hit cancel, and there's an achievement for it. The timing is tight enough that it's mostly a cushion for when you're going to shield up anyway, but we're just a little too late. I wouldn't recommend trying to do it on reaction. Remember, risk versus reward. When your shield is off, you have wings. These things are great for energy recovery. Look what happens when bullets pass through them. They're huge too. You can dodge pretty safely and still have no trouble recovering. Just, don't mess up. That would be bad. There's also a scoring incentive for having your wings out, which I'll talk about later. Your final feature is that many of your moves will give you some invulnerability. That's shown as a transparent globe over your character, and in that state you can't be hurt even if your shield is off. You're supposed to use that a lot. More about that later too. Score is purely for showing off in this game. There are no score extends or any other in-game benefits for it. The leaderboard for this game doesn't even work anymore, as far as I can tell. That being said, I think it's fun, so let's go for it anyway. Your score for killing an enemy is its base score times your rate times the multiplier of the method you used to kill it. You get rate by picking up items dropped by enemies. Some enemies also turn on-screen bullets into rate items when killed, though that's not your main source of them. These items automatically move towards you, so you don't really have to think about collecting them. They start at their base value and decrease a bit as they travel across the screen, though the difference isn't drastic. What is drastic is the difference between grabbing them with your shields on or off. If they're off, you get whatever normal value is left after distance is subtracted. If they're on, the value is cut to 1/10 of normal. That's right, you lose 90%. That's pretty much the only thing you need to remember about rate. Make sure you drop your shield when you kill enemies so you don't kill your score. I lied, there are a couple more things to remember. Rate resets at the start of every stage, so you won't get a lot of score for your early kills no matter what. This creates the dynamic of using easier methods to make absolutely sure you kill everything early in a stage to maximize rate, then putting more work into getting a lot of high scoring kills later on once your rate is built up. The other thing is that a handful of enemies don't follow the formula. The gun bits of the Stage 1 boss give a flat score reward regardless of rate or finisher. The final phase of the Stage 2 and Stage 3 boss are only affected by your rate, not your finishing method. These are the only examples I know. Please tell me if there's anything else that breaks the rules. Next, let's talk about methods. Methods are the moves you use to kill enemies and generally prevent yourself from dying. Every method removes bullets that are right next to you when activated, and many give you some invulnerability on top of that. You're supposed to do this a lot. There's even an achievement in-game for spending a lot of time invulnerable. It's to the point where this game is almost not a shmup sometimes, because you're expected to power through a lot of the bullet patterns of this game without even trying to avoid them. To understand the way your methods affect score, I should explain how they work in general. Normal shot. Not technically a method, but it needs to be described somewhere, so here it is. Your normal shot is garbage for most situations, and this is on purpose. There are times when it's handy for killing a few bugs when you want to conserve energy for other things, or to build up energy a bit faster against a boss or something like that, but it won't do any kind of heavy lifting. It actually has a bit more utility in Akashic mode, because you can trigger some revenge bullets to help you recharge faster if you know what you're doing, but that bullet pattern is pretty quick and dangerous, so you've got to be careful about it. Some enemies are outright immune to it, or give rewards if killed by methods, so that's just another bit of the game telling you not to rely on this thing. ×1 multiplier, the worst of anything in the game, of course. Dread Scissors. A two-step melee attack that's strong enough to kill most things in a stage, and is great for weakening bosses too. By two-step, I mean you do the motion and spend 1 bar to get your first attack, then you can press the command button again to spend another bar for a wider sweeping attack that also blocks bullets. The block is not very reliable though, so don't stake your virtual life on it. Kills with Dread Scissors can be either ×4 or ×6 multiplier depending on how close you are, I think. It's really finicky and doesn't really matter because this isn't a method you use for the multiplier. Annihilator Chaser. A staple for killing lots of small enemies, this attack shoots more when there are more enemies on the screen. When the screen is crowded enough, Chaser will spam so much firepower that even larger enemies can be killed. The problem is that it will often miss when there's a few mobile enemies, making it unreliable for times like that. However, there's more. This is a 3-stage move. After you use Chaser, you can press the button again and get a completely different method, and that is Stinger. The second step of the Annihilator Chaser series. A volley of rockets spreads out behind you, picks a target, and heads for it in a straight line. The target seems to be whatever enemy is closest to you, and there's some delay, so they will probably miss if the enemy moves. The damage is very good for its low cost, but you also need to use Chaser first. It's usually faster and easier to just kill something with Dread Scissors instead. There is one extra perk though. Stinger gives you a half second of invulnerability without cutting your energy, so that can be nice. Press the button again and you get Annihilator Seed. The third stage of the Chaser string, and the one that punishes you the most for using it blindly. It's a long-lasting homing attack that deals damage on contact, which means it's strongest against big enemies. The problem is that this is the first of a sizable list of methods which severely cuts the energy you can get back while it's out. This means that even though Annihilator Seed gives a lot of damage compared to what you spend on it, you lose all the energy you could have gotten while those things are active. That makes the effective cost much higher. All 3 stages of the Chaser string have a ×2 multiplier, which makes them bad finishers for high-value enemies. I also think that this 3-stage method, along with the method-only enemies, are references to Refrain Prism Memories, but that's a little off-topic. Moving on. Menace Rejector. Amplifies your normal shot and makes you automatically fire it for a while, and it also pushes bullets away from you. That push is not super strong, so you have to be pretty careful about it. Sometimes it can hurt more than help. It deals good total damage for its 2-gauge price, and it's easy to use, but it cuts energy recovery while active, so we know that there's a big opportunity cost attached to it. Multiplier is ×3, which in some games would be important, but not this one. Banish Blast. The easiest method to do, this removes all bullets on the screen and makes you invulnerable for a second or so. Its damage is so pathetic that it barely scratches anything bigger than the swarms of bugs the game likes to throw at you. That being said, it does come in handy when there are a few bugs on the screen and Chaser might not hit them all. It's supposed to be a panic move, but I find it more valuable as a calculated tool to deal with certain obnoxious situations. ×2 multiplier on kills, so even if you could kill big things with it, you wouldn't want to. Attractant Other. Oh lordy. First, the good parts. One of the nice things about this game is that the bullets are color-coded. Red bullets are fired based on your location, blue bullets are not. With other types of attacks, you need to work it out yourself, but I still think it's a nice quality of life thing. Attractant Other summons a decoy that makes enemies fire directed shots at it instead of you. It blocks shots and fires back in the opposite direction as a counterattack as well. Even aside from the decoy property, it's a pretty handy thing to hide behind. When the decoy runs out of power, it explodes, damaging enemies and blocking even more shots until the explosion ends. That sounds pretty good, and in some cases it absolutely is. But not as many cases as you might think, because now we talk about the downside. This is another of those methods that severely cuts your energy intake while it's out, it lasts a really long time, and there's no real way to end it early once it's started. If you do this method by accident, it will ruin your day. Or at least your score, but using this at a bad time is also more likely to get you killed than pretty much any other method. Keep those move inputs clean, folks. For scoring, this can go from ×2 to ×4 depending on which feature of the decoy kills enemies. Not super high even in its best case. Jaunted Driver. On its own, this thing is okay. It's a manually targeted attack with some splash damage, but the splash isn't that big. It deals some damage, but considering its high energy cost of 4, the damage is not all that amazing. You're invulnerable for a second while aiming it, and for a couple of seconds after firing, though your energy recovery is cut during that time. So why do you see me using it over and over in my game footage? The score multiplier for killing things with J-Driver is the highest of anything you reliably have access to. Technically, danger prognosis can get pretty high, but not reliably so, and I'll talk about that later. With J-Driver, the closer the targeting symbol is to you, the higher the multiplier, up to just a hair less than ×20. This is very easy to set up because of the invulnerability you get while aiming, as well as the use of other methods, so it's a vital scoring tool in the later parts of stages, as well as, of course, boss fights. It's also worth noting that at the default firing distance, your multiplier will still be ×18, so in some cases you can get more total score by using that distance and AoE to kill more enemies at once. It decreases more sharply than that if you push the reticle further away, so be careful with that. Danger Prognosis. This game would be very different without Danger Prognosis. We know this because the DLC level nerfed its strongest properties, and as a result, I pretty much never used it there. If you're curious, without this thing I was a lot more careful and went only for J-Driver kills against a couple of important boss phases. As for what those properties are, the short answer is infinite energy. When you activate Danger Prognosis, you create a large field that slows down bullets and blocks normal lasers. When the field ends, any bullets within it get reflected back and you become invulnerable for a couple of seconds. Your energy recovery is not cut during this invulnerability, which makes it very easy to abuse as you can just kind of ram into a bunch of shots and get your energy back. Then you can do it again if you feel like it. There is one thing to be careful of though. If you are already invulnerable from another source that doesn't let you recover energy, like a shield break or J-driver, that property carries over to what you get from prognosis. You can't use deprog to cheese the game unless you let your invulnerability from other sources fully wear off. There is a solution to this though. When you first activate deprog, you get a very short burst of invulnerability. If you let that go before detonating it, the energy cut status is cleaned off. There isn't a huge number of situations where you would need to do that, but it can be important to remember sometimes. Now about scoring. The score you get from killing enemies with reflected bullets can go up to a respectable times 16 depending on two things: how long the field was active, and how many bullets you reflected. Detonating the field right away gives better results, but the part that matters more is the number of bullets. You need to reflect a lot of bullets to get something close to the best score from it, and a lot of the time the game just doesn't give you enough material for that. This is why Danger Prognosis, while an amazing survival tool, is not the best for scoring in most cases. When it comes to survival, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why a powerful, nigh-invulnerable murder machine would be helpful for you. When it comes to scoring, there are some things to say. First off, the Eliminator is the only thing that lets you bypass the need to collect energy for your moves. You can just do whatever, whenever. Times 10 is as low as it goes for multiplier, and most of the time it will be times 14, plus a juicy times 20 for its screen-filling, long-lasting finisher. It's worth noting that using this finisher ends your Eliminator no matter how much time is left on it, so you generally want to use it right near the end, but not too close to the end, because you lose a little bit of Eliminator time when it gets shot by something, and you're wide open while it prepares that final move. What usually happens is that you use its melee to kill most things for times 14, while also using the side lasers to stop anything from sneaking by you, and then pop the finisher at the end. Of course, if you're playing for score, you've routed things so that the finisher hits a huge swarm, or a place where enemies instantly respawn when they die, or something like that. Given how strong Eliminator is, there's got to be a catch, because energy cost is not enough. You can get a full charge in a second or two, after all. The catch is you also have to charge up your Eliminator by killing enemies, and each time you use it, the next one takes longer to charge up. The most complicated thing about the Eliminator is the decision of when to use it, and that's pretty well mapped out if you're playing for score. It's actually more interesting when you're playing for survival and have to work out where and how you're going to use this to deal with some of the more difficult parts, because there's a lot of those later in the game and you can't bypass all of them. To show a bit of what the game wants you to do with all this, let's go over the Stage 2 boss. The first phase cannot be killed with damage. It has 4 attack patterns, and when you empty its life bar enough times, it cycles back to the first one. It only moves to the next phase when a certain amount of time passes. If you're playing to survive, you can play defensive and get through it without much trouble. If you're playing for score, though, you have to be aggressive and kill it as many times as you can before time runs out. That means learning how to get lots of energy off its patterns to fuel your high-value finishers for each kill. The second phase can be killed by damage, and it's not that hard to do. Just hit the center of the boss and bam, you're done. Or you can destroy the legs for points. If you wreck the legs in front, they can still block your shots, so you have to go back there and get them. No big deal, if you play for score, you're used to killing things point blank. Destroying most of the legs before killing the boss gives you a secret final phase. You can also beat this one with damage as normal, but the game gives you points and raid items after every sub-pattern just for surviving it. There's no pause between the patterns, so you need to protect yourself in some way to collect that rate without being killed. Banish Blast is pretty good for that. Some of these patterns are also pretty nasty if you're not quite used to how your defensive tools work, and considering that this is Stage 2, that might well be the case. But after you survive long enough without accidentally killing the boss, the rewards run out and you can finally finish it. Oh, and the music is in sync with the changes in pattern. I always thought that was neat. Hooray! On to Stage 3. Thanks very much for sticking with me as I listed most of the mechanics and numbers and stuff. I say most because I did leave out a couple of late game things. It's times 10, Doombringer's multipliers times 10, you're welcome. But this should be enough to give people some knowledge foundation if you want to give this game a serious try. And I hope you do. This game might not be for everyone, but it looks more inaccessible than it actually is, I promise. Thanks again, and I'll see you later.